Hey everybody, this is Uncle Zed, starting the Uncle Zed Hour. And today, I think we're going to revisit something that we spoke of a while back on my first ever podcast, which was on Bitcoins. And the reason why I'm going back to that is because since I recorded that about a month and a half ago or so, you guys have shown some interest in it, which is great. And secondly, I've seen a whole lot come out in the news and on the internet about Bitcoins. But more importantly, the driving force behind Bitcoins, which is blockchaining. So we're just going to do a quick review on Bitcoin, and then we're going to get into the technology behind it. And I'll try to explain it to you folks in layman's terms so that you can better understand what this whole thing is about, because both of them intersect each other. So starting off with the Bitcoin, as I had said before, it was an idea brought forth around 2008 or so, and that idea was to have a secure system. And the only way to prove the secure system was to build it and to do something with it. So that was accomplished way back in 2008. Where a bunch of guys got together, put some software on their computer, and they were able to progress this program and prove that it was a solid program. Solid meaning nobody could break into it. Solid meaning that the information in it was exactly as it was input, and any updates thereof that were made were checked. It made sure that nothing hokey got in there and destroyed that database. Basically, blockchain's a database. Getting a little bit ahead of the curve here just to explain things so that you guys better understand. So when this program came out and it was enacted, and however many people got involved in it, it was worth nothing as far as Bitcoins. But in order to reward people, to make sure that the system was working and it was correct as it was written back in 2008, by a person on a paper that nobody believed, they actually put that in motion. And over time, the blockchain that they built with the software on top and the information that they put inside the blockchain was verified. And by verification process, you were able to mine a Bitcoin. So these are all terms that are weird in as far as technology because it goes way back in time, like mining. So mining is exactly as what you guys think of. You go into a mine, you dig, you find whatever you're looking for, whether it be gold, platinum, whatever. You extract it, and there's your prize. That's exactly what blockchain is in relation to Bitcoin. The mine itself was the program that these guys were running on their computers. And what they were mining for was to ensure that any ledger, any comma separated value file, any information that was put inside of this system as an archive was verified to be true and then checked whenever anything was changed that it was the correct change, and then validated one more time. So when it first started, the program was validating data. And when you got to a certain point of validation, the system said, this has been validated. And upon that validation, back in the day, 25 Bitcoins were paid to the person mining that data or working that data to make sure that the data was valid. That's how people got interested in mining the data through blockchain in order to be able to get something called a Bitcoin, which at the time was worth virtually nothing. 21 million of these were put out by the person that invented this system called Bitcoin, using the system behind it called blockchaining, which we'll get into in a bit. Once somebody got paid for it, they realized that what they were getting paid was more than what they were putting out in order to verify this data. In other words, whatever system they were using, whatever amount of electricity they were using, whatever time they were putting in order to run the program to validate the data, in other words, mine the data, how much is that costing versus how much is a Bitcoin worth? At the time, it was almost a 1-to-1. So it was worth it to them to get this Bitcoin, this thing called a Bitcoin, and to have some value to it, 8 cents on the dollar, rose up to $1, whatever it was. But it was mostly a bunch of geeks trying to prove that the system was iron-proof and ironclad. That they did because it's been around for a good 10 years. You guys have seen the price skyrocket to $20,000 per Bitcoin. And the system, honestly, has never, ever been broken into. It has been cheated, but it has not been broken into. The cheating part of it comes when somebody steals somebody's wallet, their digital wallet. In the beginning, people tried to double pay themselves, but the system caught it, flagged it, and it was stopped. All of this will be explained here in a bit. So that's how Bitcoins were born, in order to prove a technology that they knew would be solid. So getting back to Bitcoin, the things that I've been noticing, number one, it's going through the roof as far as price. And nobody seems to know why. In my first podcast, I try to explain that, in that anything of value is given a value because somebody's willing to pay that much for it. Period. I don't care what it is. Food, clothes, gold, Bitcoins. It's how much is out there, how much are you willing to pay for it, and how quickly can I get it and make some money off of it. So that's what people put in their brains, and they saw things just going through the roof. So now I'm seeing stories of people taking second mortgages out on their homes to buy Bitcoins. They're spending their kids' inheritance or their college funds trying to invest desperately on something that they see going up by 400, 500% a month. There was actually a story, and again, I'll post all of this on my media so it's referenced so you guys can actually see it. But there is a story out there of a man who took a bag full of Chuck E. Cheese coins and sold them as Bitcoins at 10 grand a pop, when Bitcoins were sitting at about 15 grand and change. So whoever they sold them to thought they were getting a great deal. Problem is, they were Chuck E. Cheese coins, because Bitcoins, people, are not something solid that you can hold in your hand. It's virtual cryptocurrency, which means there is nothing that you're ever going to hold in your hand that'll resemble a coin that says it's a Bitcoin, unless it's something that you buy just for keepsakes because you happen to be invested in Bitcoins. That Bitcoin is just like a coin, a commemorative coin. There are no Bitcoin monies out there. And as far as dollars, cents, coins, it does not work that way. By virtue of definition, virtual cryptocurrency. Look it up. Put that in your Google bar, and it will give you what that means. This guy was able to make $1 million off of people selling Chuck E. Cheese coins, passing them off as Bitcoins before he got caught. Honestly, I would have stopped at about 500,000 and got the hell out of town if people are that uninformed as to what they're investing in. So a Bitcoin, people, is exactly what a stock is. The difference is a stock has something behind it, like a company, a product. Take, for instance, the fruit store, Apple. Their stock goes up and down depending on what they release, how good their release is, how many mistakes they make when they release something, how good their product looks, Something tangible that you have in your hand. Buy a car. They have stocks because you're buying a car, something tangible. Well, Bitcoin is not tangible. It was an idea of a system called blockchain. And in order for them to prove that blockchain was secure, they spit out something called a Bitcoin, which was something somebody thought of. It was an idea like Litecoin, like Ethereum, like everything out there. It's an idea somebody had for a virtual currency. They put it out in the market. They stick it inside of a machine. The machine has software on it. The difference is it's not centralized. It's decentralized. And the decentralization comes in with blockchain. So to go back on that, everybody knows this because you guys all use the technology. Whenever you're at work or maybe even at home, you guys have one central repository where all your information's kept. That may be backed up by tape or by other means, or it might be duplicated even amongst another machine, which is a complete copy of the primary machine. No matter how you do this in today's IT world, you have one central point of failure, which is that one server holding all your information. I don't care how big it is. I don't care how much noise it makes or how much heat it produces or who sold it to you or how many hard drives are in it. Just know that all the information that's in there is just one central point of failure, period. So if that fails, in my world when I used to work in it, I'd have failovers, which were a secondary server that had a copy of everything that was updated on that primary server up to a certain point. And if the primary kicked out or went bye-bye for whatever reason, because these are machines just like robots, so they will at some point go bye-bye, the secondary kicked in, and you hope that the secondary was in good enough shape to stay up long enough for you to rebuild the primary, and then it would copy all the information over to the primary kick over again, and you were off and running. Problem is, in between all of that, you were down. Sometimes for a minute, sometimes for an hour, sometimes for a week, a month. I've worked in places where it was $100,000 a minute for every minute that we were down as far as a fine, because we were dealing with casinos and money. So downtime costs us a lot of money. And you will have downtime because switching over isn't automatic. Not all the data gets copied tit for tat. You might be a minute, 5 minutes, an hour behind. So your secondary server is never going to have updated information. If it does, you're lucky. If you have a good backup, you're lucky if you can get that thing back up and running in 4 hours if you don't have a secondary. That's a centralized system in which we're used to using. Well, blockchain came in and blew that completely apart. They use the same exact principle of storing a file, only now it's decentralized. Now you have nodes out there. Nodes being different computers. And it's all public, by the way. It's not like you have to have special permission or whatever. So Bob comes up with an idea that he wants to insert some data on livestock that he has. Bob's able to get himself an account. He can start blockchaining using other people's servers or nodes. They could be laptops. They could be servers. They could be anything that can get hooked up to the internet, period. Depends how much processing power you have. Bob went into that blockchain and he starts putting in information about his livestock. Well, blockchain then goes in there and verifies that Bob put in that data, goes to the second node, and it verifies that it came from the first node. There's a hashtag behind it. There's a header above it. Pretty much the same way packets work through the internet. There's a header, there's a footer. So it knows where it's going. It knows that there's more coming. It knows where it's going. It knows where more is coming until the whole packet gets there. And then poof, there's your file, there's your picture, there's whatever it is that you just downloaded. That's how that works. Same way torrents work. You guys know about torrents and about downloading stuff. Blockchain is exactly like torrents. except for one little difference. It's secure. Unlike torrents, where you're getting pieces of files from 1,000 people to be able to download your favorite movie so nobody gets caught, that's a distributed system of getting those files through a torrent. And that's how that works. You're not getting that one gigantic file for one person. You're getting little chunks from 1,000, 2,000 different people so that nobody could be identified. And then in the end, all those packets come together, because that's what they're called. And if they're all in order, poof, there's your movie. You're able to watch it. Well, blockchain works exactly the same way, only instead of getting a little tiny piece from 1,000 people, you may have 1,000 computers out there that are verifying Bob's entry. So to give you a real world example, what really is a blockchain? So a blockchain is just a data structure. That's all it is. And how that data is logically put together and stored. So a blockchain is exactly like a book, where the chain part of it is a chain of pages that make that book go from page 1 to page 1,000. The block part of it in blockchain is the text that you're reading within that page. That's what's considered the block. So when you turn the page to page 1 and you start reading your story, that part that you're reading in blockchain terminology would be the block of information. So then you need to know information about itself in order for it to verify that that information is correct. So in a book, if you look at a book, you always have two things on a page. Actually, three. The block, which is the information that you're reading. Then you're going to have a header, which means at the top of the page, you're either going to have the name of the book that you're reading or the name of the chapter of the book that you're reading. And always, no matter what you're reading, if it's more than one page, down at the lower right-hand corner of the page usually, it could be in other places, but usually in that position, you're going to have a page number. So the header and the page number would be the chain portion of the blockchain. So now you can understand or put in your head what a blockchain is. It's just a page in a book, the block being what you're reading, the chain being the header, what chapter am I reading, what book am I reading, and what page am I on. So you turn to page number 2. Page number 2 references page number 1 and continues your story through that block. It verifies that the story is continuing, being added to, or being explained. However you want to see that block of text coming at you is. Not only does it do that, but it checks on itself to make sure that that header is the right chapter or the right book that you're reading, and that page 2 is sequentially following page 1. That's the chain part of it. Now you flip the page, and all of a sudden you get to page 4. What are you going to do? You're missing a whole block of data or a whole page of the story on page 3. You can't continue reading this book because it's not going to make any sense to you. Why? The header's the same, but the footer changed. It went from page 2 to page 4. So you stop. You can't read this book. You throw it away, or you put it on the shelf, or you try to imagine what it said, but it's just not the same. So that's basically exactly what a blockchain is. Just close your eyes and picture that. If you enter data into a node, let's say that you have 50 nodes, meaning 50 different computers that are running the same version of the software, that are hooked together through a service that's allowing blockchaining to happen. So you've now just entered page number 1 into the blockchain. The block part of it would be the information that you're putting in there, which would relate to the text that's on the page that you're reading. The header on the blockchain is going to tell you where it's coming from Bob. So it knows where it's coming from. And the footer, or the page number, is going to be a hash code that the blockchain produces saying, Bob just entered this data. Here's the block of information. It could be a spreadsheet, a smart contract. It could be inventory. It could be a number of things. And this is why this system is so beautiful, because it intermingles with what we know today, how we store data today. It's just different in the way that it's secure, firstly. And secondly, it checks upon itself to make sure no changes were made or no thievery happened or nothing sneaky happened in between, like going from page 2 to page 4. So having said that, the number of the page is now a hash code on that first node or that first computer. It just says, hey, Bob entered all this data. It's Bob's data. That's up at the top. The middle part of it holds the data, which is all encrypted. Nobody can read it. In the bottom, the first node produces a hash code, which is a bunch of gobbledygook that looks like numbers, an alphanumeric string, if you will. And then it passes that on to the second node of 50, let's say, that are in this cluster. The second node says, where is this coming from? Oh, it's coming from node number 1, which is identified by this hash code. But what is it? It reads the header that says this is Bob's information. Now, through that hash code, which is your footer, and through that, it's Bob's information, which is the header. That second node goes in and checks the block, all the data that's in there. And it verifies that whatever was put in node number 1 is exactly the same in node number 2. If it passes that test, it goes on to node number 3 with a different hash code that was produced by node number 2 to verify on node number 3 where it came from. Is this correct? And where's the history of all the paths that this took in order to prove that it was correct? And that continues through however many nodes you have until it gets back to the first node, verifying that the information Bob put in was not changed, was the same since he entered it. And no sneakery, thievery, no break-ins, nothing happened. Because if anything happens, like we went from page 2 to page 4, the same thing that you would do with that book, the system does. It stops. Says we have a problem here. We cannot keep going because the data from node number 29 isn't matching the data from node number 28 when it's doing its proving process through the blockchain process that I'm trying to explain to you folks. So what it is, basically, it's like a cop that's just verifying that over and over and over. In the Army, if you were ever in it, and if you ever get questioned by police, you will always be asked the same question 5 different ways. They're trying to catch you in a lie. That's a known way to question somebody. And again, try to catch them in a lie. This is exactly the same principle that's being used for blockchain. It's just going over and over and over and checking to make sure nothing got changed and that there are no lies, no sneakeries, no thieveries going on, and passes it on to the next node saying, now you check. Now you check. So when going back, when the system first started, they would put in a file that would go through 40, 50 reiterations of this, and once it completed and went back to node number 1, 25 bitcoins was paid out to the guy that did it because he was using his computer, his electricity, his time to prove that this system was solid. Bitcoins were born. Bitcoins went nuts. Everybody seems to think they know about Bitcoins, but it's not about Bitcoins. Bitcoins is a product of a system that's going to take over everything. It's already started. There are many banks that use this because now transactions happen seamlessly. The problem that they're having with this is that they're realizing not only is the transaction seamless, but they don't have a history of it because nobody can get into that blockchain except the person that entered the data and the people that were given rights to read it, not write to it, but read it, because Bob might have a couple of associates that he allows. Like suppose you have a company that has umbrella companies under it. You may create a blockchain for your main company and allow all your umbrella companies to go in and input data because they supply you with the end product. They supply you with a product that builds your end product. So you have to have visibility of all your umbrella companies on how they built things, where they built them, when they were built, in order for you to ensure that your end product is done correctly, safely, and if there are any problems, you can go back on that data and figure out who did what. Because right now we don't have traceability on food. Very few things that we can trace back to the original source to figure out why people got sick, why people died, why there was a problem, whatever. Well, this system has a built-in way for you to backtrack. That's the second beauty of it. So it's secure. It checks on itself. It'll stop if somebody changes something or tries to do some sort of finagling. It just won't continue. And if you do it long enough, it'll pay you because you're basically using the system and trying to prove it over and over and over so people believe in it. And now you can see the applications thereof where it can go across the board from food to cars to seeds to anything that we consume can be put into the blockchain. Because the blockchain isn't centrally administered and then a bunch of clients hook up to it where they can change the data, they can save the file, they can manipulate the data, they can copy it and print it, whatever. Now it's distributed from peer to peer. And you guys have heard that before, peer to peer. Again, with torrents, it was always a peer to peer. You were one peer hooking up to 1,000 different peers, getting a little chunk of a file being delivered to you. It's exactly how blockchain works. Difference is, again, it's secure. It's not giving you something. It's allowing you to store it. It's like a big, gigantic safe. So there are many rules to blockchaining. There are many different types of software out there that you can use. You could just look up Bitcoin. You could look up blockchain, look up software driving it. Just put that in your Google bar, and I guarantee you that you'll see things. And as far as software programs that are out there, Ripple's one of them. It's a centralized way of banking where you can transfer money from point A to point B immediately, even large sums of money. Because right now, even though the banks are using the same type of system, they're using it centralized. So in order for them to take out $10 million from Bank A and digitally transfer it to Bank B, they have to put a hold on that money until Bank B receives it, until Bank B validates it, until Bank B deposits it, and then they release the money and the transfer takes place. How many times have you been told your check's going to clear in 3 to 5 days? When you need the money now. Well, if you ever dealt with anybody with Bitcoin and they pulled out their little wallet, it could be a digital wallet, it could be a piece of paper with the hash code on it, and it has a scannable barcode on it. It could be on your USB stick, it could be on your phone, laptop. Not a coin, people. That does not exist. Don't be that naive to think that somebody's going to hand you a Bitcoin and tell you it's worth 17,000 and he's selling it to you for 9. Come on. Educate yourself. If you're going to get into it, at least type in what is Bitcoin. How do I receive Bitcoin? You'll find that there are thousands and thousands of exchanges out there that are helping you mine it, helping you get into it. Free courses on it. Wallets that they give you. that you can store stuff in, piece of paper that you're going to print and keep in your back pocket, and go to the Harley dealer that accepts Bitcoins and hope to God that it doesn't go up double the day after you bought a Harley, because that's what seems like it's happening these days. It's very interesting in that it's just this easy. I'm just going to read you off some bullet points on exactly how a person gets in and starts off a file inside of a blockchain. In this instance, let's pretend that you're connecting to a Bitcoin network, because everybody knows what a Bitcoin is. So you connect to a Bitcoin network, you go out there and find one. There's plenty of them out there. You start downloading the blockchain, which is a software package that they're going to give you. Then you're going to start storing blockchains or data that people put out there. Again, it could be a smart contract, it could be a CSV file, it could be a spreadsheet, it could be a recipe, it could be whatever. Right now, they're just banging away at it to prove to people that this works. Once you store that blockchain, your node or your computer is going to be listening for any transactions. It's just that simple. It's going to sit there and it's going to say, did this file change? At some point, some node's going to hit your computer after you downloaded all this stuff and say, hey, something changed here. So when something changes, you're going to validate that. Your computer's going to validate that through the software that has that blockchain stored in it that was listening for a transaction. And it's going to validate that transaction as being correct. So there it is. It's just like when they check your $20 bill with that little funky pen they got to make sure it's not phony. It's exactly what this thing's doing. It's checking to make sure that the data that was initially stored in there, that you stored, that now changed, is a valid change. Once it validates that, it passes that valid transaction to the next node. Yet it keeps a copy of that block changed, and it continues the process all over again. It listens for blocks, it validates blocks, it passes the block. Then it starts creating a block. How does it create a block? Well, every time you change something in it, it's like another page in the book. The story continues. So now you're on page number 3, and it's been validated. And you're making sure that page number 3 followed page number 2. So you just extensively started mining or started proving that the data or the block that's in there is part of that chain. Really just that simple. It's a brand new concept using technology that we have, but merely tweaking some code and doing checks and balances on it. And if anything comes in the way of that being invalid, then that transaction is refused and a flag comes up until somebody goes in there and checks it to see, why did it change? Why was this added to it, not validated? So, how hard is it for people to actually break into a blockchain or a Bitcoin? Because that's what people know today, being the granddaddy of this new technology. And I think that's why it was put out there, so that people could pay attention. How else would you pay attention other than something worth $20,000 a pop? Of course it brought everybody's attention to it. Media's all over it. So they put Bitcoins out there, I think, to prove the blockchain system. So it was kind of a ruse in a way to prove to people that this actually worked. And the only way that you were going to prove it was going to work is to pay you, is to give you something that's tangible that you could spend. Otherwise, it would have just been a cartoon that you're watching on TV and nobody would have paid any attention to it. But as soon as money got attached to it, boy, everybody started paying attention. So the only things that somebody can do who happens to be in the blockchain world and is validating transactions that he may be dishonest about, and as far as a miner, is he can simply refuse to relay a valid transaction to other nodes. In other words, hold that transaction for whatever reason. Maybe he's pissed off at whatever, and he decided that he's going to suspend this transaction as being valid and not pass it over to the other node. Well, if that happens, the whole system kind of stops. That would not be good. He could attempt to create blocks himself and try to exclude transactions of his choosing. So you can start seeing where people that are entering data into blockchain have to be trusted. It's not, even though I said it's public, it would be public to the company running it, knowing who is allowed to put data in there. Not everybody. Maybe the supervisor of the production line, and the supervisor of the production line support team that buys all the parts and pieces that they need. Those people can input things, but not everybody in the production line. It wouldn't even make sense. Or if the person that's mining was attempting to create a longer chain, meaning something that was previously accepted as a blockchain at a certain length, he tries to add stuff to it, in essence making orphan blockchains that are not part of the main chain. Those are like floaters out there. And then what they would do with that, I'm not quite sure. But I'm just trying to relay 3 things that a miner or a person working within the blockchain world, trying to prove the data is correct, what they can do in order to slow down or stop the system, or create a flag where perhaps it's taking you a little bit longer to withdraw your $100 from your Bitcoin wallet. Which, by the way, has happened because people are going nuts over this. So there are delays upon receiving your money because the systems are going nuts trying to validate all these things. So now you can see how the processing power has to be out of this world in order to get thousands upon thousands of transactions, over $16 billion worth of Bitcoin out there, and people are paying for stuff and receiving Bitcoins as gifts. All of that has to go through this, and it has to be validated. So it's going to slow it down a little bit. Or you're going to have to buy a computer the size of your house. Now you're seeing why Bitcoin mining is not worth it, because in order for you to mine a Bitcoin, you're going to spend more than whatever the value is today, electricity-wise, computer-wise, and time-wise, for you to validate stuff if you didn't get in at the very beginning. To make it worth it for you to mine a Bitcoin after 3, 4, 5, 6 months, now it's looking like about 129 different nodes need to validate one transaction for you to get a Bitcoin. So it's going to take you about 8 or 9 months. You're going to probably spend about 40, 50 grand to get out a $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 Bitcoin, whatever it is. Doesn't make sense. What a miner can't do, and this is 100% proven over the past 10 years, it's 3 simple things. They cannot create a Bitcoin out of thin air. They can't just go into the system and pull out a Bitcoin. Bitcoins only come out of the system after you have worked the minefield and validated the block, produced a header, produced the hash code, and passed it on to the next node to make sure that that data is correct. Again, page 1 to page 2 to page 3. Just validation of one page following the next, the same book. The story flows till you get to the end. When you get to the last page, it is now finished. The book. You have now validated every page. You haven't skipped any. The story makes sense. Another thing he cannot do while mining, any miner out there, is go into your account and steal anything from you. That is impossible. And I say that because if you were to look at the block of data, in other words, if you were to look at a page in your book and you were to look at that page as text, it makes sense. But if you were to scramble all of those letters and make different words with it, it wouldn't make sense. That's called encryption. So everything that's within that block, doesn't matter who sees it or who looks at it, except for the person that entered it or owns it, they are not able to see what's in it because it is all scrambled. So he cannot or she cannot or whoever cannot steal a Bitcoin from your account, period. Another thing that they cannot do is pretend to be you and make payments or receive payments on your behalf, because that block belongs to you. So since you created that block and that block went into this world of checks and balances, it has a header, it has a footer, it knows what's going on. So it knows that that data is correct. You're not going to go in there and just pull out data and say, well, I just got $100 from this dude's account and I'm going to go ahead and spend it or pay somebody with it or pretend to be him. You can do that now. I've had my credit card stolen numerous amounts of times. They haven't become me, but they try to spend money thinking that the person on the other end was going to believe that they were me. Well, luckily, my bank put a flag on it, stopped it. Transaction stopped. They weren't able to spend the money. They alerted me. Then I had to wait 3 or 4 weeks to get a new card. So for 3 or 4 weeks, I had no card to get money out of the bank with. That's the system we work with now. This is exactly the same. The difference is it's immediate and it's 100% foolproof. There will be no time where somebody steals your credit card or your block information. There will be no time where somebody can become you and steal your identity and manipulate that data. It's yours. It's your money. It's your data. It's whatever you put in there. So we're talking about Bitcoins being one thing that is stored under blockchain and somebody can't manipulate, just as much as they can't manipulate the data that I inserted there on my factory that's building widgets and all the processes that it takes from the wood coming in to widgets going out the door. I could have that whole process in a blockchain, verified, and if anything were to happen, a year, 10 years, 50 years from now, I can go back to that blockchain and do a lookup as to what happened when and why did whatever happen to a person was a direct result as to one of the steps on my manufacturing. It's now being used for the food and agricultural business in Europe, where they can track anything that was born all the way through slaughter. Somebody gets sick, they can backtrack on that and figure out why. It was on my first podcast. I explained it that way. Just want you to go into it and listen to it, because that's the introduction to Bitcoin. This is one level above. This is what resides behind the Bitcoin, why the Bitcoin came out, and why this is the future of computing. Because it's been proven. It's been proven with money, the one thing everybody's after. And that money, not only did it start at 8 cents on the dollar when it first came out, last time I looked, it was bordering 17, 18, 19,000 per Bitcoin, a virtual cryptocurrency. And the value that we put on it rose to almost 20,000 a pop, if not more. So it's valued because people know there's a limited amount. It's all the buzz right now. And everybody has to keep up with the Joneses, so everybody wants a chunk of it. Well, I'm here to tell you that about 1,000 people own the largest share of that 16 million that are out there. And all the rest of us have just little bits and pieces of it. So people that are out there are getting loans on their houses, spending their kids' inheritance or college funds, or buying Chuck E. Cheese coins thinking that they're Bitcoins. Be very careful what you do. Would you buy stock at its highest, waiting for it to go higher? No, you buy it at a low and wait for it to go up. So if you're trying to buy Bitcoin right now at its all-time high, I feel real sorry for you. You just gave up your house or your kid's inheritance or whatever. You made a real bad choice because you didn't take time to look up what is a Bitcoin. Not only that, but where the hell did it come from and why is it out there? Well, I'm telling you right now why this is. It was a way to prove that blockchain worked. We're going right back to that because that's what this podcast is about. Not Bitcoin, blockchain. So I've explained to you in layman's terms that it's exactly like a book. The page being taken out of that book will disrupt the story, and you'll probably throw that book away or put it on a shelf and never pick it up again. In a blockchain scenario, it's exactly the same, only when that page is missing, a flag goes up and somebody has to go and look at it. Pretty soon it'll be autonomous, where a robot looks at it with its algorithms and figures out that somebody entered something incorrectly, contact a person and make them go back in and put the right data in. That's just that simple. It's not going to be because somebody broke in, because somebody stole your stuff. Hasn't happened, won't happen. Unless somebody gets real sophisticated and builds a super duper duper computer that's able to crunch so fast that it can get in there and swipe things. And it's not going to pay back for the amount of money you put out to steal. It's like buying a brand new Cadillac to go steal a Volkswagen. Just doesn't make sense. So that's not going to happen. So blockchain is just basically exactly what it says. Like many things out there, what they're named is exactly what it means. It's just a block of data on a chain. One of the chains gets kinked. You're done. It stops. I believe that in the near future, as we're seeing right now, blockchain is going to become more and more and more prevalent. And the reason for that is because just a few things like data storage, data distribution are going to be so much tighter, so much more secure that defense mechanisms that you have to have out there to make sure nobody steals it, replication of your servers, having to buy servers to replicate your data and hope to God that it's updated. All of those things are little by little going away because more and more people are figuring out that blockchain, again, being the back end of financial transactions right now, are up to snuff. They've been proven. In a overall summary, if you will, in a Bitcoin, the blockchain is basically producing digital tokens. The Ethereum, same thing. Any kind of cryptocurrency that you're looking at right now is being put out there by the person that came up with the name Ethereum, Bitcoin, and all the different names that are out there, Litecoin. So basically what they did is they were able to get some software together. They were able to get a peer of nodes or a bunch of computers to upload that software. And then they came up with the name, like Ethereum. Now what I want you guys to do out there is use my software and let me put a block of data in there and let's go round and round and make sure that this data is correct. It hasn't been changed. And if it goes around and around this many times, I'm going to give you an Ethereum coin or a Litecoin or whatever it is. So they're going off the back of Bitcoin, which was started by the name Bitcoin on a paper with this type of back end called blockchain. And they've adopted that to different types of cryptocurrencies. And the reason they're doing that is because that's what you guys are paying attention to. Because I'm sure you guys don't give a damn about how your car was built. I'm sure that they had a real hard time trying to figure out which cars had the Takana airbags that are blowing up in people's faces and making them go into hospitals. Had they had blockchain in there, one look up, they would have known who the distributor was. If the distributor had blockchain, they would have known where they went wrong with those pieces of metal being inside that airbag. They would have been able to get to that distributor that did that or made that mistake. And number one, ensure he doesn't do it again. And number two, figure it out real quick rather than taking years upon years upon years until now we're finally figuring out that almost every single car has these airbags in it, but we don't know how these pieces of metal got in there. Well, blockchain would have solved that. And that's what they're going to right now. Financial transaction institutions are going to that because most of blockchain right now, as I said, is financial transaction based because, again, that's what people pay attention to. So it uses cryptography and digital signatures to make sure that the person that is inputting into the first block of the chain has a proven identity, authenticity, and that person can enforce read and write access to that data. So again, looking at the umbrella companies under your main company could have come up with this blockchain and allowed Steve at the main headquarters to be the read and write guy. And then he can have one person under each one of his umbrella companies be the read and write guy. So they can input things in there depending on what process they're in with their widgets, let's say. Then you can have people in there that can just read. So you can have a wider audience that can look at that. Let's say a consumer. How was this widget made? Why did I get sick when I touched it? Oh, geez, I figured out that it was made out of poison oak. Why did they use poison oak? Geez, I'm allergic to it. And there's the guy that did it. Frank, out in the middle of the woods, chopped down the wrong tree. It's just that easy. So it could be written by certain people that you allow through cryptography and digital signatures, double check system to make sure you are who you are, but it can be read by as many people as you allow. It could be the whole world. So not only does it make it hard once you write into that block for you to change anything in it, because now it has a history. It has hashtags, it has a header, a footer. It's gone round and round to different nodes or different computers, and it's been proven. That's now a historical record. Once it's historical, really hard for you to go in there and change it. And if you do, the system's set up to detect it almost immediately when somebody's trying it. So it will stop. In other words, somebody stole my credit card. That person having my number was able to go to ABC store 2, 3, 4 times over and buy a bunch of stuff before my bank was flagged and said, oh, wait a minute. This is outside this dude's spending habits. Again, it's in a database. And it puts up a flag. By the time that bank figures out that my number was stolen and that the purchasing habits are different, that bank may have lost thousands of dollars that I'm not responsible for because I didn't buy it. They gave me a piece of plastic ensuring me that this piece of plastic, if you keep in your wallet, only belongs to you. And no one else can read it, write to it, spend it. Well, we figured that one out. Real easy. It's happening every single day to millions of people. And millions of dollars are being spent by the banks to cover, which in turn we pay for because they raise our rates. They're not going to lose money. No businesses. So having said that, they're now moving towards what looks to be their solution, which is blockchaining. They're building a chain, and that chain is verifying each block. If one of those chains has that flag that says the spending habits are kind of weird, it immediately flags. That person will not be able to spend money. More and more financial institutions are looking real hard at this because they're seeing that Bitcoin, again, with over $16 billion worth of assets out there in today's value, probably more, has never, ever been fooled. Other than a human mistake, like the last big ripoff of Bitcoins was because somebody had their digital wallet, which is something that they will give you if you hook up to a Bitcoin exchange, that then holds your hash codes and your block and your header, that verifies that this money belongs to you because you hold that hash code in your hand. Well, this one particular company had over $61 million worth of Bitcoins because they were a mining company. For some reason, they decided to stick that all in one wallet, thinking it was secure. And yes, it is a wallet like what you think of putting it in your pocket. It just has digital information in it, which again could have been put on a USB stick, could have been printed as a barcode, could have been stored electronically somewhere, but they decided to put it inside this wallet. And for some reason, this wallet was left on a desk. And somebody came by and picked it up. And because they now have the hash codes in their hand, it now belongs to them. Just like if they were to have found a $100 bill on the ground outside in the street. That $100 bill does not have the person's name in which it belonged to that dropped out of their pocket. So guess what? That bill has your name written all over it. It's yours. That's how they were able to steal over $61 million worth of Bitcoins. Not because the system screwed up or blockchain screwed up, because a human left $61 million worth of Bitcoins inside of a wallet in a form of a printed out code on top of his desk. He forgot to put it in his safe. So it is said. I believe this company cashed themselves out and they walked away with $61 million basically doing nothing. That's just me personally talking about this. And I won't even mention the company's name because I don't want no trouble. So, having known that, this is pretty much the only way that you can take money, if you will, is by basically stealing somebody's wallet. You know that the system's pretty secure. So let me try to give you another visual. We tried the book scenario in which I told you the block was the text. You got the header and the footer. Page 1 leads to page 2, leads to page 3, till you get to the end of the book, and the story makes sense. Have a page missing? Not so much. So, blockchaining, if you will, goes exactly like this in another example. So let's say that you're sitting around with your family, and you got a bag of Legos in front of you. You grab a Lego. It's an 8-post Lego, or 8 dimple Lego, whatever they call them. Long little rectangle. And your color is blue. And that's basically what you see as the block or the information. The information is that Lego. Doesn't matter the color. You pass that Lego and the bag to the next person on the table that you're sitting in. They reach in the bag and they bring out another Lego that's identical to that. Might be yellow, might be green, might be whatever. They can now stick that Lego on top of the primary Lego. And what that's doing is validating that the shape is the same, that the dimples on it fit, that everything fits tight, and that you can move on to the next person. Again, doesn't matter the color. Let's say the color designates the person that's fact-checking the block, which is that Lego. And you keep going round and round the table till Grandma gets it right before you get it again. And she pulls out a purple one. Again, color doesn't matter. Purple just means Grandma pulled that one out. But what does matter is that she pulled out one that fits on top of all the other Legos that people put together, making just one gigantic tower of Legos, all different colors, but they all fit. And it all comes back to the originator, who was the person that pulled out the blue original Lego, which again was the block of data that we're supposing that Lego is. And every single person in that table makes part of the chain of the blockchain technology that gets passed from one person to the next. They reach in the bag, they verify the Lego's correct, they stack it on top of the Lego, and they pass it on to the next person. There's your chain. It gets back to me, the person that pulled out the blue. I could verify that from blue, every which color up until I reach the purple, which Grandma picked right before me, all match. Your blockchain is complete. You've been verified. Nothing changed. Second scenario is somebody in that table picks a 4-post or a 4 dimple and sticks it on there. It'll fit on the Lego. It'll even continue to stack, but it's not correct. So the game stops until Wonder Boy that picked that 4 post Lego takes that Lego out, takes the Legos and goes back to the person that just gave him the Legos and say, please verify that these Legos are correct. Yep, since the blue one, they've all been 8 dimple, they've all fit. I'm going to pass it back to you to see if you can verify this again. If that is verified by that block, it continues the chain. But because the person picked the 4 post block, the system flagged and stopped. That's your safety measure to make sure nothing that you entered originally gets changed by anyone. First, they can't because it's all encrypted. But this is just an example of how the system would stop if it found that from a rectangular Lego of whatever color, now you're trying to put a square Lego in there. Ain't going to fit. Ain't part of the plan. Doesn't follow the rules since the first Lego was brought out. The system just stopped. So there you go. If somebody steals your information once again, it may take the bank 2, 3, 4 days, $10,000 worth of expenses before they say, hey, dude, I don't think it was you spending money over there. We better, get you a new card. My bank seems to be real quick on it, so they flag me like right away. I don't know if they're using blockchain or some other type of software, but they're real quick on, this guy's spending habits are X, and we're seeing Y, doesn't match, stop. So quick that the person that stole my credit card was not able to complete their purchase. Not just one person. They spread it to like 4 or 5 people, and at the same time, they hit different places and tried to spend as much as they could. And guess what? Each and every one of them got rejected. Well, that's blockchain technology, which I am sure the first to take a hold of this, as with everything else in this world, will be military. They'll figure out a way to use this to make sure they can track everything. From where a bullet was made to who shot it, just as an example. The second and most important, which I think is already happening, is financial. So that the hemorrhaging that eventually comes back to us, because if a bank has to cover costs, they're not going to lose money. They're just going to pass those costs on to the consumer, which is you and I. So in the end, we all pay more for somebody else trying to rip us off. I, for one, truly believe that because of Bitcoin, using blockchain, and showing that that technology is secure was the foremost reason they designed it this way. Give you money to prove that this works. So what I'm urging you guys to do is learn yourself by simply typing into your Google bar, Bitcoin, what is it worth? Where do I buy it? How do I get it? How do I spend it? And then if you want, look at the technology behind it and be amazed, because this is what this podcast is about. Bitcoin just being the child of the granddaddy called blockchain. I'm hoping all you guys have a wonderful holiday. I thank you very much for your support. I'm on various media, Facebook, Twitter. You can find me under the Uncle Zed or Uncle Zed on either one. And I greatly appreciate your comments, good, bad, and different, ideas for shows, whether or not this made any sense to you. If you want me to use more layman's terms to try to explain something that you may not understand, I'll do it. This is Uncle Zed saying I'm out.